Did you know most of the PMP aspirants think that scope management is simple, define what's in and what's out. But here's the truth, over 40% of project failures track back to poor scope management. And this is exactly what we are going to fix today. Hi, I'm Ankit, and in this video, we will break down scope management from the PMP exam and real world project perspective. Everything you need to fully master this topic. Now, let me be honest with you. This is an exhaustive session, not just a 5-minute summary. By the end of this masterclass, you will understand every process, artifact, and connection within scope management. So you can handle both PMP questions and real world client scenarios with confidence. We will cover everything from planning scope and collecting requirements to creating a WBS, validating deliverables, and controlling changes. Now, every example, document, and quiz you will see today is designed specifically to help you think like a manager, not just to memorize terms. It is very important when it comes to PMP because what they are trying to test over there is your knowledge and not your memory. So, grab a notebook, stay with me till the end, and let's make sure scope management never feels confusing again. Ready? Let's dive in. Now, before we start the scope management plan, let me give you a quick recap. In our previous video, we discussed the planning phase overview, the big picture that ties all planning processes together. To recap, planning process has four different parts: project management plan, baseline, supporting documents, and specialized plans. Now, further, project management is also divided into 11 parts: the scope management plan, schedule management plan, cost management plan, quality management, resource management, communication, risk management, procurement management, stakeholder engagement, change or configuration management, and integration management plan. Now, in this video, we are starting with the first and the most critical part of the journey, the scope management plan. Because if you get scope wrong, everything that follows, schedule, cost, quality, it all starts to crumble down. Now, before we begin, one quick but very important note. Every single plan you create in a project will go through multiple updates, reviews, and approvals. Keeping track of all those changes is what we call a version control. Now, this is such an essential discipline that I've actually made a dedicated video only on the version control, where I explain how to use the version numbers, naming conventions, and document repository in detail. So, if you haven't watched that yet, make sure to check it out after this video because that's the foundation of everything that we are about to discuss. Let's now deep dive into one of the most critical parts of project management, the scope management plan. Because if you get scope wrong, everything that follows, schedule, cost, quality, starts to crumble. The very first question that comes to mind is why scope matters. Now, scope is the foundation of our project. It answers the most fundamental question: what are we building? Why are we building it? And what's not included? If your team ever said, "Oh, I thought that was part of the project," that means you are experiencing scope ambiguity. On the other hand, if your client has ever said, "Can we just add one small change?" here you are facing scope creep. That's why the scope management process exists, to make sure that we define, validate, and control exactly what the project will deliver. Now let's look at the big picture. In PMP, as per the PMBOK guide, scope management is made up of 6 connecting processes, starting with planning, how scope will be defined, then collecting requirements, defining scope and structuring it, creating WBS, validating scope, and controlling the whole process. Now, these processes work together to ensure clarity, alignment, and control throughout the project lifecycle. Let's review all of them one by one. But before we start, there's a PMP Insight Bite for you. These are small topics which are out of scope for this particular video, but very important for you to know because PMP loves to confuse students in the exam. So, the very first PMP Insight Bite for you is every process here follows the ITTO structure: input, tools, and techniques, and output. Don't worry, we will touch on the key ones as we go. All right, let's get back to the topic. First, let's talk about plan scope management. This is the process where we define how the scope will be defined, validated, and controlled. In simple terms, it's the rule book for managing scope. Now, the output of this process of plan scope management is scope management plan. Don't get confused here. Plan scope management is the process that we follow, and the outcome of the process is your scope management plan, which is a document. So, as I was saying, plan scope management includes how we will define scope and how it will be approved, what templates and tools we will use, how changes will be controlled and baselines updated, how deliverables will be validated. You can think of this as setting your scope governance system. It ensures everyone follows a consistent approach when defining or updating project scope. Let's look at this from an example. Let's go back to our TechNova project, the personal finance mobile app. Now, before the team starts listing features, project manager documents that the business analyst will collect requirements, the steering committee will approve the final scope statement, and any further changes must go through the change control board. Now, this simple planning step saves the project from confusion later when stakeholders request an unapproved change. And trust me, it happens a lot. Now, here's another PMP insight bite for you. This process also gives you the requirement management plan. It defines how you will collect and track requirements across the project. All right, just to test your knowledge, here's a PMP brain teaser for you. If your project doesn't have a formally approved scope management plan, which process will suffer first? Define scope or control scope? Comment your answers below. No Googling. Now, since we have discussed the plan scope management, let's get to the second point: collect requirement. Now, once the approach is defined, we start gathering requirements, the foundation of your scope. Now, this process transforms stakeholder needs into detailed and measurable requirements. Now, the PIM box suggests several tools and techniques here, including interview, which is a one on one discussion, focus group and workshops to gather diverse perspectives, survey and questionnaire for large stakeholder groups, observation for shadowing end users, prototyping to visualize the solution early, mind mapping and affinity diagrams to group related ideas. And one of the most powerful techniques is the requirements traceability matrix or RTM. It links every requirement back to the business objective and forwards it to the deliverable that fulfills it. Let me give you an example. Now, in our TechNova project, the business analyst runs a workshop with the marketing and the IT teams. They identify features like user login via mobile number or emails, expense tracking by category, budget notification. Now, see, each requirement is documented and added to RTM, ensuring traceability from idea, development, testing, and then delivery. All right, I'll tell you what. Let me open up a requirement traceability matrix document for you so that you can understand it better. Give me a second, guys. All right, here's the document. Now, this document ensures that every requirement we collect is properly tracked from its origin all the way through design, testing, and finally delivery. As you can see here, it starts with a simple table. Let's look at the columns. We have requirement ID, description, source, deliverable, test case ID, and the status. Let me give you an example. Now, if we talk about the first requirement ID, which is requirement 001, the description is user can log in via mobile or email. The source is a stakeholder workshop from all the tools that we have discussed before. And the related deliverables is the login module. You will notice the test case ID TC101. That's how QA ensures this requirement is verified during testing. Similarly, if we look at request 002, the app displays categorized expenses. It's linked to the expense tracker delivery and correctly marked in development. Now, this table becomes your single source of truth, connecting business needs and deliverables to testing outcomes. Now, in real projects, we keep this updated throughout the life cycle. It helps during audit change request and even at closure because you can show which requirements were delivered and which weren't part of the scope. So, when you hear collect requirements or validate scope in PMP terms, this is the real world document behind those processes. All right. I hope you guys understood that. Let's get to the next point. Okay. Now, here's a trick question for you to test your knowledge. Two stakeholders give conflicting requirements. Which process ensures this conflict is resolved before the scope definition? Validate scope or collect requirements? Comment your answers below. So, guys, so far we have discussed plan scope management, collect requirements, and now let's move to the third process, define scope. Now, once all the requirements are gathered, it's time to define the project scope statement, a detailed description of the project will and won't deliver. Now, the project scope statement includes project objectives, deliverables, acceptance criteria, boundaries, what's out of scope, constraints, and assumption. Think of this as your project's contract of understanding. It removes ambiguity and sets the foundation for your WBS. Let's understand this with an example. Now, in the TechNova app, the scope statement clearly states, let me read it out for you. The mobile app will support Android and iOS platforms, include expense tracking and budget features, but will not include investment tracking or AI based suggestions in phase 1. Now, this clarity ensures everyone knows exactly what's included and what's not. Now, here's a PMP insight for you. Real world clarity. The project scope defines what you are building, while project scope defines how you will deliver it. So, it probably gives you a clear idea of the difference between a project scope and a product scope. Now, here's another quiz for you to test your knowledge. All right. So, you are defining scope, and stakeholder adds a new feature idea. Should you include it now or wait for formal change control? Now, this is a tricky one. Drop your pick below. Now, before we get to the next topic, we need to understand the activities that creates the scope baseline. It consists of project statement, WBS, and WBS Dictionary. Now, WBS Dictionary describes each work package. Now, once approved, it becomes your benchmark for measuring any future changes. All right. So, we have already discussed plan scope management, collect requirement, define scope. Let's get to create WBS. Now, WBS is where the planning turns visual. So WBS is basically a decomposition of the total project work into smaller, manageable components called work packages. The goal is simple: break big deliverables into pieces small enough to estimate, assign, and track. Let me show you a WBS document so that you can understand it better. Give me a minute, guys. Now, here is the WBS for our TechNova financial app. You can see it starts with level 1, TechNova app project. That's our overall deliverable. Then we break it down into major components: design phase, where UI UX design and prototyping, development phase, testing phase, and deployment handover. Design phase, where UI UX design prototyping, development phase, where backend API and app development will happen. There will be a testing phase where functional, security, and UAT testing is going to happen. And then finally, deployment and handover, which includes your go live, documentation, and training. Now, each of these can be further decomposed into smaller work packages. For example, under the development phase, you can have 1.2.1 API integration and 1.2.2, which is front end development, and so on and so forth. Now, remember, there's a 100% rule. Your WBS must include 100% of the project deliverables, and nothing should be outside scope. So, basically, if it is not in your WBS, it's not part of the project. We also maintain a WBS dictionary which describes each package, who's responsible, what is what is the output and acceptance criteria. I'll get to that in a minute. Now we have discussed WBS, but what exactly is a WBS dictionary? Let's take a quick look at the WBS dictionary, the document that gives life to every component in your WBS. You can think of WBS as the skeleton, which is the structure, and WBS dictionary as the flesh. It's the details that makes each part real. While the WBS shows what needs to be delivered, the WBS dictionary explains each deliverable in detail. It describes the work package, who owns it, what is to be delivered, what deliverable will look like, and how it will be accepted. It describes the work package, who owns it, what the deliverables look like, and how it will be accepted. Let's look at an example. Here you can see in our TechNova app, under 1.2.1 API integration, the WBS dictionary would mention that the backend teams owns it. It must support 1 lakh users, and it will be accepted only after it passes the load test of 100K users. I hope this makes it clear what is the difference between WBS and WBS dictionary. But just to be crystal clear, let's look at the difference between WBS and WBS dictionary. Now, let's start from the purpose. Now, WBS visually breaks down the entire project scope into smaller, manageable deliverables, whereas the dictionary describes the details of each element in the WBS. Now, the format, it's like a tree-like structure, and WBS dictionary is a supporting document. It is usually a table. Focus, what work will be done. In WBS dictionary, the focus is the details about the work, who, what, and the acceptance criteria. Now, WBS contains work packages and deliverables. WBS dictionary contains scope description, responsible owner, deliverable output, and acceptance criteria references. WBS is used for planning, visualizing scope, preventing scope gaps, whereas WBS dictionary is used for clarifying expectations, assigning accountability, ensuring consistent understanding. We have already discussed the examples. In WBS, it's development phase, API integration, front end development, whereas WBS dictionary goes one level more detailed into that. The API integration builds structured data interface, who will be the owner, how it will be accepted, etc. All right. Now that you have seen how the WBS looks like, let's talk about the golden rule that makes it truly effective. Rule number one, the 100% rule. Every level of decomposition must represent 100% of the work in that level. Nothing less, nothing more. In simple terms, if it is not in WBS, it's not part of your project. The second is there should be no overlapping. Each work package should be unique with no duplication of effort between them. That's how you avoid confusion and double counting. Rule number three, know when to stop. You don't keep breaking down work endlessly. Stop decomposing when the work can be easily estimated, assigned, and tracked. Now, finally, remember this one: the WBS is not a task list. It defines what needs to be delivered, not how you will do it. These rules keep your WBS clean, complete, and aligned with your project scope. All right, here's a quick challenge for you. If a work package is missing in your WBS, what does that mean for your baseline? It's invalid, or it can still be used with caution. If you are listening till now carefully, you will know the answer. Comment your answers below.
All right. Now that we have laid the entire foundation, we have planned our scope, collected solid requirements, translated them into clear scope statement, and decomposed everything into a clean, structured WBS. You now understand exactly what the project will deliver. In part 2, we will take this foundation forward and learn how to get formal acceptance from stakeholders, how to control changes, how to stop scope creep, and how to keep your baseline strong throughout the project. So don't miss part 2. This is where the real world application becomes crystal clear. See you there.